What is an annoying myth people still believe? Pop the Dab said. You have to wait 24 hours before filing a missing persons report. Bitter Herpes said. You can detox your body from toxins and parasites by drinking certain teas or taking some weird medication. Repeated diarrhea and frequent urination doesn't indicate toxins leaving your body. Your liver and kidneys do the job. If your liver is not functioning or you have a kidney disorder, obviously you need help, but it won't be teas that someone on Instagram is boasting about. Mugmer said. That motherfucker won an Ig Nobel Prize for that study. Medicine Prize, Donald L. Unger, of Thousand Oaks, California, USA, for investigating a possible cause of arthritis of the fingers, by diligently cracking the knuckles of his left hand, but never cracking the knuckles of his right hand, every day for more than 60 years. Source. Anal 117 said. It's also worth noting that regardless of whether or not they can, they often don't have to. Ignoring how infrequently references are actually called anymore, whenever I did it too, the only questions I asked were did they leave voluntarily? And are they eligible for rehire? And that told me basically everything I'd need to know. The actual why is almost always irrelevant. Platinum 777 said. Right. Some companies have policies about only confirming the start and end dates of a former employee, and whether or not that person is eligible for rehire. Usually, people who have been fired for cause are not eligible for rehire. The reason those companies have such internal policies is to protect them from having civil charges brought against them if one of their employees, say, a manager, accidentally or deliberately tells damaging misinformation about a former employee. Raw Formaldehyde said. Oh boy, this is a big one. I hear people all the time that say, I don't want a raise cause it'll put me in a higher tax bracket, and I'll make less money than I do now because they'll take more taxes. Like, no. They only take that percentage from the additional money you'll be making. You'll still be making more money. For those who don't know, let's just say the tax bracket you're in at $30,000 a year is 10%, and $30,001 plus is taxed at 20%. If you make even $1 a year more, you might think the government will start taking 20% of all your money. Which, if that were the case, then yeah, $27,000 is more than $24,000.80. That would be bad. But no. They only take 20% of that $1, or 20 cents. So you'll be making $27,000.80 after taxes, which is more than $27,000. Say you used to make $30,000 a year, but they offer you a raise of $1,000, so now it's $31,000. Here's how it works. $30,000 at 10%, $30,001 minus $40,000 at 20%. Previously, at your earlier salary, $30,000 10%, or $3,000, equals $27,000. That part stays the same. Now, you make $1,000 more. This is how that works. $30,003,000 equals $27,000, so that part's the same. Now, they only tax the additional $1,000 at 20%, so $1,000 20%, or $200, equals $800. Raw Formaldehyde said. Your grand total take-home pay is now $27,800. That's $800 more than what you made in the previous year. If you get a raise, it's a good thing. If you're getting paid more money, you're always going to make more than you made before, even when it puts you in a higher tax bracket. Well, unless they raise the lowest bracket percentage much higher the next year. But that's very unlikely. They almost always only raise the taxes on people making 6 figures a year or more. For example, Biden's tax plan would be raising the top marginal tax bracket from 37% to 39.6%, which would only affect those making $462,000 or more a year. In other words, only those in the, roughly, top 1%, so most likely, not you. The raise being a good thing is assuming you are already above the benefits cliff. If it would prevent you from receiving any government assistance you were receiving, that could be a bad thing if that raise is not to a self-sufficient level. Edit. Thanks for all the awards. Karen's Little Helper said. If you get a raise, it's a good thing. While I 100% agree with your whole explanation about tax brackets, for people at the low end of the income, a raise can be a bad thing if it causes you to go over a welfare cliff. which is one of the two big reasons I'd want to replace our current welfare systems with a negative income tax. The other being how much lower admin costs would be. Ash Torrent said, "When I was a teen, me and my girlfriend at the time did the dirty. It was both of our first times, and I had always heard that there would be blood and it would hurt or be uncomfortable on the first time for the girl. Well, when there wasn't any bleeding or discomfort, I was heartbroken. I thought she had lied to me, or maybe she was cheating on me. It made me really depressed. I never brought it up with her. I was so sure that this was supposed to happen. It wasn't until much later that I learned that not all women go through such things on their first time. I wish I had that information as a teen, and I hope more people talk about this so that other young adults don't have these ridiculous doubts hurt them." Tony Danzer said, "Look, there's about 7,877,361,251 people on planet Earth as I begin typing this comment. Let's imagine that Spider Jorge is the only one eating spiders. He is single-handedly responsible for the 8-a-year average. That means in a single year he has to eat 63,018,890,008 spiders. So, 172,654,493 a day, 7,193,937 an hour, 119,898 a minute, 1998 a second. Let's give Spider Jorge the benefit of the doubt and assume that he is eating the world's smallest spiders and not the largest. He would be eating Patadigua, which at their observed largest are only 0.37 mm. This is good news for Spider Jorge, who has a very large mouth in comparison. One study found that an adult man can hold, on average, 71.2 milliliters in his mouth at once. Assuming that our spiders are rather square, we'll say that their volume is equal to 0.373, which is then multiplied by 1,000 to gather that 50.6 spiders can fit in each ml of water. This means that Spider Jorge can hold a maximum of 3,606 spiders in his mouth at any given time. Unfortunately, it takes around 10 seconds to swallow. If Spider Jorge can only swallow 3,606 spiders every 10 seconds, he is wildly behind his goal of 1998 a second. Therefore, we have to conclude that either Spider Jorge is a cryptid, or 2. Spider Jorge embellishes his data. Given these results, I would have to deem this statistic unreliable and in need of further review. Jed1M1NDTR1CK said, "Not sure if this fits here exactly, but the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit being a frivolous case filed by a money-hungry customer. That poor lady was a real victim who suffered legitimate injuries who only wanted her medical costs covered." Thin Santa Potato said, "And McDonald's was serving their coffee, at that time, at almost 200 degrees, just barely under boiling. For comparison, coffee is normally served at closer to 140 degrees, and will usually have cooled down further than that by the time you actually start drinking it. In the year prior, over 700 people had told McDonald's they had been burned by their coffee. Stella Liebeck, the woman from the lawsuit, was burned so badly that the skin on her thighs fused together and she quite nearly died. That's how bad the burns were. And as you said, the only thing she actually asked for was her out-of-pocket medical expenses covered, roughly $20,000. McDonald's came back with an insultingly low offer of $800, so she had no choice but to sue. Even then, she still only asked for her medical bills to be covered. It was the jury, not Stella Liebeck, that decided to make McDonald's pay millions of dollars, because they found that McDonald's had acted so irresponsibly and so negligently, they absolutely had to be punished. OS251,817 said, "People with OCD just repeatedly wash their hands and like things clean and organized. This is how it presents in some people. There is so much more to this mental illness that people aren't aware of that lead to people not getting diagnosed or help." Team Waffle Stomp said, "I always knew it was a serious disorder that was drastically mischaracterized but didn't grasp the full impact it could have on someone's life until my younger sister, 13, started developing it about a year ago. She needs everything to be clean, but to the point it can take an hour to wash her hands, leaving them chapped and cracked. It can take literally hours for her to shower, think 4 or 5 hours, then she wipes her whole body down with a full pack of baby wipes after the shower. It takes several hours to get ready even if she doesn't shower because she has this whole routine. To go somewhere at 7 a.m., she has to start getting ready at 2 a.m., It's taking over her entire life and I feel so bad for people who suffer from this condition. Rock and Roll Toaster said, "Is your sister getting help? For me, CPD, cognitive processing therapy, and meds helped a lot. I have OCD-PO, primarily obsessive, not sure if that's the exact right clinical term though. I was on Luvox for a while. I stopped when I started having problems with it, but my episodes were way reduced in intensity even after the fact. I still have mild episodes occasionally, but it helped so much to be free of the relentless pattern. I hope your sister gets the help she needs. That's an incredibly awful case if I've ever heard of one." Comule with said, "And ADHD is pretty misunderstood too. I was born with ADD, the one no one seems to talk about because they think it's an improper term without the H when it's actually a subset of the same disorder, minus the hyperactivity, hence no H. Also, people with ADHD are not constantly bouncing off the walls with no attention. In fact, we can experience hyperfocus, dumping all our energy into one thing that interests us. Most people's understanding of mental disorders is based on stereotypes, and it needs to stop. Update: it has been brought to my attention by several people that ADD is now outdated. The two versions still exist but the official terms have changed. So what I have is now called Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, primarily Inattentive Presentation, or ADHD-PI. Sorry for the confusion." Mediocre Med Student 1 said, "That violence in the world is getting worse and worse. Actually, in relation to the world's population, we live in the most non-violent era in history. The problem is that, while 500 years ago you might have not even heard all the news from within your city, we can now hear all the horrible news from all over the world, and we're also more people. But still, human interaction and conflict in general is much less violent than it used to be." The Fresno Farter said, "That historical armor was basically useless, only increasing the chance of maybe deflecting a blow if you were lucky. You still see it in movies, shows and games where a knife or sword or arrow will go through armor like it's cardboard. In reality, armor was very useful. Very good armor, like a knight's suit of plate, made the wearer virtually invincible. The best plate could stop even early firearms. A knight in full plate and wielding a shield was pretty much the tank of the medieval battlefield. Doubly so if on horseback. Specialized weapons and a concerted effort was needed to defeat one, although typically no one would try to kill a knight since you can't ransom a corpse. But even simple gambesons, which were made from layers of fabric, could resist a sword cut. High-quality gambesons could resist all but the strongest cuts from specialized cutting swords. Also, that swords were super heavy. A typical one-handed arming sword from the Middle Ages weighed around 3 pounds, 4 maximum. A two-handed longsword could get up to 5 pounds. Rapiers weighed around the same as other swords, which is contrary to popular belief. Yes, swinging around a 3-4 lb object would tire someone out, but the people doing so were generally more fit than the people reading this thread." Practical Safety 807 said, "My God, how I despise this one. They out here saying a knight from the Middle Ages spent ridiculous amounts of money, lugged the stuff around with them on campaign, wore it even when it was hot out, and maintained clean their armor all so they can have a 2% less chance of death on the field. LOL. When it comes to warfare throughout human history, as a rule of thumb, if people did something often, meaning the idea was widespread and commonly used, it was probably because it was damn effective." Pinky the Legend said, "I know a girl who broke down crying during our religion class, Catholic school, because the teacher kept going on about how a broken hymen was a sign of sinful activity, that it's a sin unless you're married, the typical shit. Her hymen broke during gymnastics. The priest that ran the theology department had to take the poor girl aside and explain that no, that is not what the Catholic Church teaches, and that she is not a sinner just because her hymen broke. It was an awful scene. I hated that teacher from then on." Tegsty 123 said, "As a sexual assault nurse, the hymen mythology is so incredibly frustrating and extensive. Virginity is a social term and has no medical basis or relevance. And the hymen is a ring of tissue at the vaginal opening. It should really never tear, but it could be injured in any number of normal activities, gymnastics, childbirth, sex, etc. Saying it could be broken or grow back implies that it is a membrane that covers something, which also isn't true. It can be cut or torn like any other piece of skin, and it may either heal back to its original shape or heal with a notch if the injury was significant enough. And on the subject, the myth that sex should be painful the first time, for those with vaginas, is complete bull. Appropriate preparation and lubrication is all that's needed. All this myth does is prioritize the pleasure of penises over vaginas. Camp Express said, along with all of the above listed, the student body of my 90s middle school decreed that if your thighs touch you are still a virgin, but if they don't you're a slut and all the boys can smell your vagina. This led to a lot of terrible jokes and some girls improvising douches. A particularly popular one was using body spray, alcohol-based body spray right on your inner labia. Fortunately, the girls' PE teacher, who also taught sex ed each year, informed us to not spray anything alcohol-based on our nethers and that the boys were trying to one-up each other to show off. They were also corrected by the boys' PE teacher, so it ended there. Tom Onshud said, the one thing everyone thinks they know about lemmings is bullshit. They're not suicidal, and will not succumb to herd mentality and follow each other over a cliff in a big group if they're scared. This fact originated in a Disney-produced nature documentary in a very loose sense. They literally made shit up whole cloth because it looked cool on camera. They chased the lemmings over the edge of a small rise, and used camera tricks to make it look like they were falling to their deaths. Then the lemmings became a pop culture metaphor for harmful conformity, and cartoonists all over still reference it. D. Buttersnaps said, there's a show on NPR called Hidden Brain and they did a story on some current research about why the brain is separated into two hemispheres. The psychiatrist that was interviewed theorized that, I'm summarizing here, the right hemisphere sees the big picture while left hemisphere deals with the individual details. I'm not sure how well received this idea is, but it was interesting when they talked about different kinds of brain injuries and how a stroke in one side would leave you with no perception problems, while a stroke in the other could lead you to believe that your body parts actually belong to someone else. Webb said, history is filled with this stuff, but I'm gonna go with general misconceptions due to an inability to read history in context. Often if you read a funny and strange story where you go haha those dumb superstitious people in the past, in reality there isn't superstition behind it, there's politics and power. For example, if you hear of someone being excommunicated and declared a witch heretic for some odd reason, the truth is the given reason is just a made-up excuse, and the real reason is political intrigue. Wiki Summarizer Bot said, Lizzie Velasquez. Elizabeth Ann Velasquez, born March 13, 1989, is an American motivational speaker, activist, author, and YouTuber. She was born with an extremely rare congenital disease called Marfanoid progeroid lipodystrophy syndrome that, among other symptoms, prevents her from accumulating body fat and gaining weight. Her conditions resulted in bullying during her childhood. During her teenage years, she faced cyberbullying, which ultimately inspired her to take up motivational speaking. FAQ opt-out of subreddit GitHub, downvote to remove E1.5. I'm too old for this said. Schizophrenia is not the same as multiple personality disorder. People with schizophrenia have hallucinations of some kind, auditory, visual, tactile, etc. Multiple personality disorder is basically like being two or more completely different people in the same body, usually without any memory of what you did while you were the other. The best example of this irritation was a political cartoon showing Uncle Sam, representing the U.S., straddling the U.S.-Mexico border. One hand held out said no entry, the other said help wanted. The header was schizophrenic Sam. It irritated the shit out of me. Unless he's acting this way because his hallucinations are prompting him to, it has nothing to do with schizophrenia. Sophia Arnold said, I'm autistic and I absolutely despise this stereotype. It's overtly dehumanizing and I hate how people get away with spreading it. I remember there was this mass shooting in 2012. It turned out the shooter had Asperger's, and so many people latched onto this as an explanation for why he killed all those people. There wasn't any major outcry over this. There was hardly anyone saying it wasn't okay to say that about autistic people. People could explicitly say I was less human than them, and apparently it was perfectly acceptable for them to do so. If major news outlets ever said a mass shooting happened because the shooter was gay, or black, or a Muslim, there would be an enormous backlash. But it turns out if you're autistic then nobody on the planet gives a shit about you. Anurkim said that when kids start lifting weights it stunts their growth. Completely false. It can actually help increase height in kids. I think this started because oftentimes you see more buff short men than tall men, but it's really just a combination of 3 reasons. 1. Shorter people have more leverage with shorter limbs, so they get easier activation from their muscles. 2. It's easier for shorter people to gain weight. Because they're short, they don't have to eat as much. 3. Apparently only 14.5% of Americans are over 6 foot. It really boggles my mind that people will really stop kids from becoming stronger because of hearsay. The exterior posterior said. The July and August were added to the calendar, throwing off the September-October-November deck numbering. This is not what happened. July and August were actually renamed versions of the original months Quintilis and Sextilis. They did not throw off the order. The calendar used to begin in March. January and February were the months that were added. They didn't use to keep official track of the months during winter. King Numa Popilius was the guy who added these months in around 713 BC. The shifting of the calendar to January 1st is also attributed to him. It was not the fault of Julius Caesar.